Go.
Hello, everyone. I am Tam Gonzalez with HomeSmart Encore, and today we are starting the third video in our Commercial 101 series. Today we're going to be talking about cap rates. I'm so excited. We have Lisa Marie Wand once again, who is based out of Reno, Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, Master's degree in Business Administration. Her career began in 2003, purchasing a brokerage in downtown Reno. She is licensed in California and Nevada, and she has been a massive resource for me. And as many of you already know, because you've already been watching, she agreed to do a series for us residential agents that were wanting to know a little bit about commercial. And really what I wanted to know is, how do I get paid without having to get a master's degree like Lisa Marie has? So she's been helping us out with that. And I've been begging her for weeks to teach us about cap rates, because any of us can just jump on a cap rate calculator and do a really basic calculation. But it's different to really know that, to actually know that in your body, know it intrinsically how to do that. I mean, she's to a level where she can be walking a property and just in her brain with a little bit of information, she'll tell her client the cap rate and tell them exactly what to purchase the property for. So Lisa Marie, thank you so much for being here today and for teaching us about cap rates.
Oh, and thank you for the great introduction, Tam. So you've been patiently waiting for a few weeks for this episode, right? To talk about cap rate. You're going to be armed and dangerous after this.
I'm ready.
So everybody watch out. So I want to do a little bit of an introduction and talk just a bit overview, kind of big picture about cap rate. And then we're going to go through the steps of how to calculate this mysterious number or percentage today. Okay.
Yes.
So real estate investors rely on a lot of different types of information when they're looking at investment properties. Income producing properties specifically is what we're talking about when it comes to cap rates. For example, the property's location is a really big criteria for investors to look at, and any prospective changes that may happen in the area. So for Reno right now, we have like so much stuff going on with the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center and the Tesla Gigafactory that's out there. So a lot of investors come here now for those very two reasons. One being the location is premium right now, and what's happening in the neighborhood, in the area, are two of the big things that investors look for when it comes to income producing properties. And then one crucial piece of information that helps investors make their decision about income producing properties is the capitalization rate, or the cap rate is what you hear it called for short. And the cap rate is expressed as a ratio, and it's a ratio of the property's net income as it relates to the purchase price or the list price, the price of the property. So I want to say that one more time. Cap rate is a ratio, and it takes the net income of the property as it relates to the list price or the purchase price.
So net related to purchase price. Perfect. I'm ready. I'm taking notes, even though I'm on this call with you, because this is so important.
Okay. And then this capitalization rate, or cap rate for short, allows investors to compare and evaluate various properties to realize what their potential rate of return might be. So if you have someone looking at 3 investment properties that are of a similar type, this ratio, this capitalization rate, can help them compare the various properties and decide which one is the best investment for them.
Beautiful.
So it's a tool to compare income producing properties, or to look even at one specific property to determine, is this going to meet the rate of return that I think is reasonable for this particular marketplace, whether it's Las Vegas, where you are, or Reno Tahoe, where I am. So does that kind of make sense as like an overview?
You're getting me so excited. I have goosebumps because I'm thinking of the conversations that this can bring about. Because we were talking in a previous episode of how to, kind of trying to help other agents learn how to breach that conversation with their client. But this is a no-brainer. I'm literally visualizing being at a walkthrough with a client and just casually mentioning, hey, just so you know, if you ever decide to rent this out down the road, right now I've calculated your cap rate to be X. And then
you look like a badass.
Exactly. And then you easily transition into that conversation of, if you're ever interested in investing down the road, whether it's residential or commercial, I can totally help you out with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you can put this little piece of magic in your pocket, and you can pull it out whenever you want. And I highly recommend to everybody that's watching out there, if you have questions, please type them below. We'd love to see your feedback. But once you get used to calculating the cap rate, and I recommend you practice it, then you can just be like on your phone, pull out your calculator, and you're like, yeah, check this out. So, it makes you look amazing.
Super it really smart. Does. And I just want to echo what Lisa Marie just said. Whether you're watching right now live or you're watching on the replay, definitely send us questions. Just put them in the comments and we'll answer them, because I know that this is, it sounds really complicated, but she's going to break it down into a step-by-step process where everybody's going to be able to understand it.
Yep. So if we don't have any questions, I'm going to move forward. So I broke down the capitalization rate into 6 steps that we're going to go over today. So if you can remember at least the first 3, which is how we're actually going to calculate the cap rate. And then the last steps are just kind of some overview things to do and not to do when it comes to cap rate, different ways you can use it. Okay.
Absolutely. And just so that everybody who's watching knows what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be going over we're going to learn how to calculate gross income, calculate net income, calculate actual cap rate. We're going to be comparing cap rates, learning not to solely rely on a cap rate, and using a cap rate to justify income level on investment properties. And then she's going to tell us about some actual commercial real estate resources towards the end as well.
Yep. Thank you. So here we go. So the first step is to calculate the gross income. So when it relates to an investment property, gross income specifically includes the rent roll or the rents that are coming in for the property. So that's most of it. There could be a couple of other things that are added in there. For example, if there's laundry machines on the property and those have income coming in, you can include that in the gross income. Another thing that I see that comes up is if there's vending machines and then those are producing income. So anything that's producing income for the property can be included in the gross income, but primarily it's going to be the rent. So in the example that I'm going to use, we have an investment property that's bringing in $1,000 per month in rent, and we're going to multiply that by the 12 months in the year, right?
Okay.
So 1,000 times 12 is?
12,000.
12,000. Ding, ding, ding. You win, Tam. So the gross income for this hypothetical property we have for these calculations we're going to do is $12,000. So that's the first step. You need to know what the income is. You need to be able to calculate it for a year so that we can go to the next step. Any questions there? Pretty simple,
no questions
right?
There. I just want to clarify on a commercial property, anything that's helping to bring into income. So even like an ATM machine at a strip club, stuff like that would count also.
You got it.
Perfect.
Show me some 20s.
All right. Perfect.
Okay. And then the second step is, now that we have the gross income, we need to calculate the net income. So let's talk about that a little bit. Calculating the net income essentially means you're going to subtract all of the operating expenses that are associated with the property. So you're going to take all of those operating expenses out of the gross income.
So like HOA, taxes, things like that?
Yeah, so you got it. So let me give you some more examples. So examples of operating expenses could be maintenance, could be taxes, which you mentioned, insurance, utilities. If you have a professional property manager, commercial property manager, or a residential property manager, then those expenses. And then we usually add in a certain percentage for vacancy. So there's a cost associated with that, right? If it's not rented out and you're not bringing income in, then it's actually an expense.
Exactly.
So I do want to point something out, super important here. And this is where I see people make mistakes all the time when they're calculating the cap rate, is cap rate does not include purchase costs of the property. So that means any costs that are associated with procuring the property. That includes fees of any kind, mortgage payments, anything to do with the loan do not add that in to the net income calculation.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because those expenses are so variable in nature, Tam, and a lot of it has to do with the investor's relationship with their lender and, like what kind of interest rate and things like that they can get. And so when you put the loan expenses and the expenses of acquiring the property into the capitalization calculation, then it's no longer a neutral number.
Okay.
And that's really what the cap rate is. It's meant to deliver a neutral number to you, so it doesn't take into consideration anything to do with a loan or acquiring the property.
So closing costs, title fees, none of that.
Or mortgage payments. So if you have to make a payment every month, whether it's interest only or regular loan, you do not include it.
Okay.
It's separate.
Gotcha.
So in this hypothetical situation, we had $12,000 in gross income, and I calculated $2,000 in expenses. So we take $12,000 in gross income, we subtract $2,000 in expenses. So how much is our net income?
$10,000.
Got it. That's right.
I really hope I don't
Absolutely.
get any of these wrong. I'm going to look like a big idiot.
If it gets any more complicated, I won't ask you. Or maybe you should take your shoes off now so you can count.
Oh, man.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So those are the first two steps. Gross income, net income takes us to the third step where we're actually going to calculate the capitalization rate. And here's how we do that. We just need a couple of numbers. We need the net income, which is
Net income is 12,000.
10,000.
Wait, 10,000.
Yep.
See, I'm
Net
reading it
income's 10,000. And then for this hypothetical situation, the price of the property is 175,000.
wrong. Okay.
Wouldn't that be nice if we could buy a property, an investment property for that much right now?
That'd be great.
Not in either of our markets, right? So we take the net income of 10,000, we divide it by the list price, which is 175,000. And that's going to give us a decimal. And the decimal is 0.057.
Okay.
So the way that we come up with the cap rate is we take that decimal 0.057 and we turn it into a percentage, which is 5.7%.
Okay, it was 10,000 divided by 175,000. Is that what you did?
Yeah. Yeah.
10,000 divided by 175,000 equals 0.057. So 5.7%.
5.7%. So that is the cap rate, is 5.7%. So by itself, that number may not mean anything to you, right? So there's a couple of different things that you need to know, and we're going to talk about that. The next step, number 4, is comparing the cap rates. So now we have this number. What does that mean? So you can use the cap rate to quickly compare similar investments against each other. So if we were talking about a rental right now, for example, we could look at other rentals in the area and calculate the cap rate like we just did for each of them, and then we can compare them. And so that's when it starts to actually mean something, is when you have more than one property that you can compare. So the cap rate basically represents the estimated percent of return and the investor wants to make on an all cash purchase. Because remember, we're not including anything to do with a loan or acquiring the property. Cap rates allow for like a quick, rough comparison of the earning potential of similar properties. And it helps narrow down your choices. So if we had, Tam, a property, this one's at 5.7% and another one down the street with an 8% cap rate, which one do you think would be the best option?
I'm going to say most likely the 8%.
You are correct again.
Depending on the condition, right? I mean, unless it was a complete, so absolute dump, and then you were going to have to completely remodel it.
Right, which is a scenario. But if we were going to take like similar like property, so let's say they're generally in the same area, similar condition, all those things aside, because we're really talking about the earning potential of the property, the 8% would have a higher ratio of return. So
Absolutely.
The net income compared to the purchase price. So that is how you could compare two properties, is you could quickly take these couple of numbers that we've used and come up with the cap rate and go on a rough, quick estimate. Overall, the 8% is going to be a better return for my client.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that you look at is if you know the cap rates in your area. So I know the cap rates in my area really well, and I know some of the ones in Las Vegas. So for a rental, a multifamily rental, for example, our cap rates run anywhere between 4.5% and 6.5% in this market right now. So if I saw the 5.7%, I could say to my client, this is a decent deal in this marketplace. But if they wanted to make even more return all other factors being the same, the 8% would give them a higher rate of return on their money.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. Is there, and you can tell me if you don't want to talk about this right now, we can always do another episode, but is there a quick and easy way, like to get the reverse of that, to say, okay, I know my client wants a 10% cap rate. How do I quickly calculate that to come up with a purchase price?
Yes. And so I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit on the step number 6, where we have another way that we can calculate the cap rate. So pretty much once you get these numbers down, you can kind of move you remember like algebra when you were a kid, how you can take certain variables and plug them into the same formula to come up with the missing piece. It's kind of like that. So yes, if somebody's like, I need a 10% cap rate, like how much should I pay for this property?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to show you how to do that.
Woo woo.
So we talked about comparing the cap rates. So the next thing I want to talk about is don't rely solely on cap rates. Although it's a quick and easy way to compare properties, it shouldn't be the only factor that an investor looks at. And I do have investors that I work with or have worked with that the cap rate is king. That's all. What's a cap rate? What's a cap rate? What's a cap rate? Well, it's not the only thing that matters, because it is a rough estimate and it doesn't take into consideration things like condition of the property or the financing on the property. It's just an across the board clear number that you can use to look at properties side by side, because real estate investments can be really tricky. You know, it's subject to market forces, and it's also unforeseen events that are outside the arena of the cap rate. So it's really good to consider things like the growth potential in the area and the income potential increase for the property itself. Like here, right now, Reno, I read a statistic recently that said we're number 3 in the nation for increases in rental rates and property values. So if you took that into consideration along with a cap rate, then you'd have a much better picture about the property itself and the area, and if it's a good investment for you.
That makes a lot of sense. And that really makes a lot of sense for me right now, just even in my neighborhood that I focus on, where I live is Enspirada. And there's not only is the Las Vegas economy booming, but our zip code across the board went up about 10% last year alone. And we just barely have an infrastructure. We're getting our first gas station in a month or so in this entire area. We have no commercial shopping centers that are really specifically for our neighborhood. There's one close by, but it was meant for a different neighborhood. So as they continue to build those out, we've got the Raiders practice facility coming, tons of commercial buildings and storage facilities popping up everywhere. Rentals are flying off the market, houses are flying up the market. And just like what you're saying, I mean, that's something that I'm assuming that any investor buying in this area is going to be highly considering is, hey, this might be the cap rate today, but over the next few years, as this continues to build out, there's huge potential here.
Right. So when you take the cap rate into consideration with like what's happening in your marketplace, what's happening in mine, then it paints a much bigger picture of what's going on. And it's a way to really attract investors. So you could say, you know, the increase you've had in home prices and all of the development that's going in, like those are the things that investors want to see, as well as the cap rate. Because if you got a great cap rate in a place that's not a whole lot happening, long term, it's not going to be as good of an investment. And residential agents can use this for residential rentals, like single family homes. You can use this calculation. And that would be a great thing to do in your area if you had clients that were looking to buy rentals. Like you said, they're flying off the shelves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So number 6, we're going to talk about using the cap rate to justify the income level of an investment property. So this is, if you know the cap rate of the properties in your area, which is what we were talking about, like, so here, multifamily, let's say somewhere around 5 or 6%. Then you can use that information to determine how much net income a property would have to produce on an annual basis, to, you know, how much it would generate to determine if the investment is like worth it. So this is another way that you can back into this calculation to determine. I think we're going to have a visitor. Here comes my cat. She wants to help us out. She's commercial cat.
Commercial cat.
Commercial cat. Yep. So, for example, if you know the cap rate and you have the price, then you can determine how much money should this property actually make per year to make it worth it for me to buy. And this is another cool trick that you can use with clients, because even though it's a fairly simple calculation, people don't really understand it. So you simply multiply the property's asking price by the cap rate, and to find the recommended net income level. So in my example, I'm going to use the price is $400,000 on this investment property. And let's say the average cap rate is 8%. So we can find the recommended income level by taking the $400,000 purchase price, multiplying it by 8%. And did you come up with a number?
Let's see.
So 400,000 price times the average cap rate in the area, 8%.
32,000.
Exactly.
So that's what it would need to pull in annually to hit that cap rate.
Yeah. And that would be the net income. So remember, that's after expenses. So what other number would you need to know? Probably is the gross income, or what's the average amount of expenses for that type of property, so you can back into the net income number. Okay. So like I know here, about 20% expenses would be a good number for a multifamily property. So I could come up with gross income pretty quickly.
Okay.
So what does this mean? So you see a property, you're like, okay, this is how much money it has to produce. And you can ask yourself, is that viable in this marketplace to produce this much income for this property? So you're not going to use this cap rate formula to come up with the rent rate for your property. You can't say, oh, I need $32,000 a year out of this property, so the rent rate is, $100 a square foot, per month. Yeah. You can't do that. So be careful with that. But what you can do is look at the rental rates in the area. What will the market bear? And then say, will that make me $32,000 a year on this property? Yes or no? If no, will it do it for me later? Because like in your area in Inspirada, the prices are going up. So that means the rents will go up. So if you're off, you can kind of calculate, well, how many years do I want to hold this until it gets to the point where it's a good investment? So do you see how that could be useful? Not only is the price good for the cap rate, but is the income that this property will produce, will it support the average cap rate for this type of property in your area?
I think that's so important. It makes so much sense, and it's so valuable, even to me as a residential agent, because I've had a couple buyers over the last year where it's been their first purchase or their first home purchase in a really long time, and they're scared and they're nervous about certain things. So being able to break something down like that, having conversation like, hey, I know you might be a little bit stressed out, but just so you know the whole picture, I've actually broken it down and taken a look at what you would get for this if you had to move out and rent something for cheaper. If you had to go back to the payment that you're used to, you would be able to rent out your property and still be getting a 4% return with somebody else paying the mortgage. So being able to break things like that, to take stress off people's back, to give them the whole picture of worst case scenario, I would still win if I purchased this house.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of a scenario where you could use this in residential as well. I talk to people like that all the time, because as soon as they buy their first house, they're going to enjoy that, but they're probably thinking about what their next house is going to be, right? That you're going to sell them. And so you can talk to them about how they could leverage that property and rent it out and what kind of return they could make on it. So that's just another way to bring more information and more value to the table.
Beautiful.
So did that help demystify the cap rate a little bit?
It really does. I'm going to work with it and practice it a little bit more before I try to show it off to a client. But yeah, it's huge to be able to know all that.
So for any of you watching either on the live or on the recording, if you have any questions or you have a scenario that you want to go over with me in regards to cap rate, please feel free to message me or leave a comment below. We'll make sure that all those questions get answered.
I just want to touch lightly on one last thing. So I know that we don't include the mortgage in a cap rate. How and when and where does that come into consideration, the mortgage that's going to be on the property?
So that's a great question. And, I've seen people, like I said, who calculate the cap rate and include the financing piece of it. And it just skews everything, because you may have someone that comes along and pays all cash. And a cap rate levels the playing field. It's like we calculate it like it's an all cash deal. So because the financing and the cost of procuring the property is different for every person, that's why we don't include it, because it will lower the cap rate significantly. So the times when an easy example that I can think of where the financing comes into play is if you're calculating return on investment. So when you're doing return on investment and you're breaking all of your costs down over time, then financing for sure would come into play. There's other more complicated commercial formulas that we use that would also bring that into play, but I don't want to overwhelm everybody with going through those today. But those are times where the interest rate and the payments along with the income and stuff would come into play. So you can look at the time value of money for your investment property over the long haul.
Gotcha. So sorry if this is a dumb question, but so let's say we have a rental, somebody's paying the mortgage on it, and the owner is barely breaking even as far as having anything left over with the rent. They're covering all their expenses and everything. Does that mean there's still, let's say the cap rate's 5% without the mortgage included, but with the mortgage being paid, they're not making any overage. They're still making technically 5%, right? Even if they're not having that extra overboard of cash, they're still making a return on their investment, correct?
Right, because they're paying their mortgage down over time, and it's like they don't have to do anything. So the property is maintaining itself. I do have clients who still have a deficit every month on an investment property, but over the course with interest income and being able to write off all the expenses and having someone there to care and take care of the property while they're living somewhere else or doing something else, all of those things have value add to them. So even if you're not cash flowing right now on a property, it can still be a very good investment because you are having all of these other expenses covered and you have the appreciation of the property and you're not paying necessarily anything out for that.
Yeah, I'm so glad we touched on that and that you cleared that up because it's such an important factor. And I keep going back to my own area just because obviously that's what I do the most of. But just for an example, I closed on a house a year ago for a client, $260,000 house. It probably would have rented for, more than what her mortgage payment was. So she would have been in the hole every month if she would have chosen to rent it out. However, we just successfully won a little bit of an appraisal battle last week and got the appraisal to come in at 309, which essentially eliminated her PMI because it came out at 2080 loan to value. So in 1 year, she has, $49,000 in equity on that property. So even if she would have been in the hole $300 or $400 every month renting it out, she still would have won at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yep. That's awesome. Good for you for helping out your client with that. It's amazing how property values in some areas are increasing so quickly. I know here, just a couple of years ago, our median home price on the residential side was maybe $275, and now we're over $350, $360 is the median home price. So yeah, taking those long-term value of the property, the appreciation into consideration is a piece of it, an important piece of it.
Yay. This was honestly my favorite class that you've given so far. I literally can't wait for the next class because I'm not sure what you're going to be teaching us next, but I know it's going to be great.
Well, and I did this just for you, Tam. So I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yes.
So there was one more thing we had to talk about today, right?
Yes. We are going to be talking about resources for commercial real estate.
Yep. So this is something we didn't get to in our last broadcast. So there is so much information out there about residential real estate, right? It's everywhere. And there's a lot of our clients are expert. We're expert. I mean, there's just so much information available. Commercial real estate, not so much. It's more of a coveted, more secretive area of real estate. And most of the time, people learn about commercial real estate from someone who's been doing it for a while. They get mentored or taken under their wing. Most people don't start out doing commercial real estate when they're in the real estate world, when that's their profession, their area of expertise. So I want to offer up just a few resources for commercial real estate that that you may actually have access to already and you don't even know it. So the first one I want to talk about is CCIM, and that is Certified Commercial Investment Manager. In my opinion, that is the pinnacle certification in real estate. It's kind of like an MBA. I've started my CCIM. It's a process. It can be a long process, an involved process, but they have a website. This certification organization, CCIM, has a website, and there's lots of information on there, and you can access it, read articles, look at the classes. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. So that would be one place that I would recommend. That's CCIM. The second thing is Realtor.com. So most residential real estate agents have a Realtor.com account, or they use Realtor.com. And when you log in as an agent, there's actually a commercial section to Realtor.com that has all kinds of resources and articles that you can check out to familiarize yourself with commercial real estate.
I had no idea.
And you probably already have that. The next one is the CE Shop. So if you've used that for continuing education, for your real estate license, they have it in pretty much every state, as far as I know. They have several courses there that you can do online for your continuing education that cover commercial real estate. I think I saw 3 on there when I looked. So that would be a way that you could fulfill your obligation for your continuing education in your state or states, and you could learn about commercial real estate.
Awesome.
And then the last one that I have, it's not something I've personally used, but I found out about it recently. You can search for it. It's called Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Commercial Agent Success Strategies. And it's a website. They sell products, courses and videos and things specifically about commercial real estate. And so if you're wanting to invest in yourself and learn more about commercial real estate, that's not the least expensive way to do it, but it's another option for you.
Absolutely. And we love video. So
we do love video.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's all I have on that for right now.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for being willing to share this with us, because just as you said, it really does seem like commercial real estate is kind of protected and coveted, and nobody, a lot of times people don't want to share or just put it out there and open and give these resources to everyone. So again, thank you for being willing to do that with us. And if you're an agent watching in Las Vegas or in Reno, the main point of all this is to educate you a little bit so that you're more comfortable talking to your clients about this, but also to give you that piece to your puzzle that you're missing, to give you an excellent agent that you can work hand in hand with, that you can call her and refer deals to. She's not going to steal your client. If they end up buying residential property, they go right back to you, but you can kind of hold her hand through the process, learn a little bit about it, and give your client a huge advantage and just a huge value proposition to be able to invest in commercial real estate with Lisa Marie Wand.
Yep. So you get to look like even more of an expert than you already are. So it's like I'm part of your invisible team. So getting more comfortable and familiar with starting those conversations, because we're all impacted by business and investments. So I guarantee you that there's a vast majority of your clients that are an untapped resource for you. So having that conversation with them about, hey, are you interested in commercial real estate? Or, you're a business owner. Do you own your own building? Or would you like to round out your investment portfolio with investing in some income producing commercial real estate properties? And then you can refer them to me or someone else that you know. And then with just working the sphere of influence that you have, you can immediately increase your income potential with just having a little conversation with someone that's value added. So I have a generous referral fee program. When a commercial transaction or a commercial lease is completed, then that referral fee goes to you and goes right into your bank account, and then you get to keep your client. So like Tam said, if they want to buy another house or do some other type of residential transaction, then they're all yours. I'm not here to take your clients. I'm just here to be of added value and help you make some more money.
Awesome. That sounds like a great deal to me. Why don't you tell them how they can reach you?
So you can reach me at 775-224-5300. My name is Lisa Marie Wand. I'm the Reno Tahoe commercial expert, and thank you for your time today.
Yes. Thank you all so much for watching today, and check us out next Thursday for the 4th video in our series.
Have a great day.